social identity chẳng rasa, cultural identity chẳng rasa, individual identity chẳng rasa, but cái thing he struggle cái chẳng mà, vô là hin. The very fact that each of us are living is a product that we are fighting every day. Ainkaraga thoma bunisunga nisak larik nipahi. These are all our struggles in life. So there is nothing to be sensitive about it. And in fact, atuna ethnic identity haitiri identity sung hin ethnic cultural identity nitina identity nitin to personal identity nitim kam kasu psychologically personal identity psychology and study kate and in study nito hocha yampa any focus ne jo collective identity cultural identity it comes under sociology and study in the top or cultural anthropology is study the top hi chung hin theory hin ya kama amen theory hi in thum tak kacham amasapen hin theoretical perspective he essentialism anti identity politics nitro hi hai sama hai kwan ma why what is the theoretical framework niti hin essentialism di chunu ni any changna any difference changna any exclusive changna any uniqueness niti ka claim nitro ayar chu khawa claim natlo karnang agency apek che karnang uniqueness ka amak inchu nang agency ga hong mak se nang ring sang mak se ka ten no nitin na chu identity ka essentialism nitia and manin theory kata anti paper kanam lokam kana ini notice sungai ampa identity politics in dai mi so ampa khawasung gan kata tak khawasung no in essentialist theory ai ni tak katluai essentialist theory ai atuna ki Chatterjee, Banerjee, Bengali, intellectual mayam hain any chunga akayung haya antia haima essentialist politics in that in that come and mani terhi lak dom no kana chu atuna chu amakmar ba any indigenous scholar akam yam here any num nyong e here tan lai chu any mi object ka po British scholar hai study in telai roman telai birman telai ma amachingan aku ti kacang telai ti magate atuning chu any mong thok yama oh can you research can the community atuna lalboy nang ba cha you are a researcher from the community itself kacang yan chu ingkina na paper I kan nang methodological approach hai ma nang methodological position niti na chu method niti khwa dan ma nang in hiwa research in hong to khwa question hi kontinga man nang yong amaga kai hin chu nang chu coming identity nati hi any english wang niti chu lived experience here nang chu com researcher ta ka khwa identity kana hai suk thai maktin ga te no ta ka kina british anthropologists sama la Bengali anthropologists can or Maite anthropologists study approach into kom ku study atlo amaja anytime he can come out no amulung rap zaman sat si mata ka jang makate ka lived experience nang ka and money method used in the to he participant observation method he used in the to I am pa hin negative oina antale en me kina adik pa ka antamahat magyara kana ayar chu may klay pa may anthropologist pa ang kadin kana chu atuna Bengali pa first ini purum tribe study ko pa yarming ka mereka pa trak ati amai TC Thrapchan Das and Mani Calcutta University di anthropology first 1921 and hawakan nama ka first batch student ko kana kan Manipur hin field work proera andatan daman sia ini purum village ini kar hin aman data collect atlo atunihin data hai kam khawakan structuralism social structuralism ta khawa data wang kan analyze in ya anthropologists including Radcliffe Brown British anthropologists and khawa data and the young syatan ta ka khawa atla idan ka tunu haymo ani mi num hat katin chu and money all outside mi wanga anthropologists sai aging hai aduna chu any hong suk yam any theoretical framework hai any methodological framework hai ma khawa ka tananga kupna defend law I should seek kachang chu hiwa paper hi aka that dom sit paper scientific paper niti atuni nga presentation niti any academic trong niti the scientific paper niti I mean scientific paper tini chu kina prose poetry literature ni ka kan chang ka te hi chu pra data collect nitwa empirical data collect nitwa ni ka te kan scientific paper niti ka scientific paper ka chang se chu na methodological na theoretical framework hi you need to specify. It's not very clear. So essentialist theoretical framework, kabasola instrumentalist theoretical framework, anti kamay political science atuna main theory in political science here. Instrumentalist nitin chu na identity ka nangin kutsu kulai oi use na to nang tak sanaman lan si ka political mobilization na to na si ka nang identity wang han se naman chai and the tino cover third look na any political science actually Jimmy amak here Jimmy la am jo hida no sita ka discussion and domain and mani theory latest theory of yang hi constructivist theory ati on identity constructivist chu amai chu ayam pa kina foreigner hai lain study tung tong and mani and tok pa tung and mani framework anti email hinga ka chang man ti ta constructivist niti chu atuna ainin khuahin man in samdan man ni thop pan samdan ma what is our struggle in life kawakan ka constructivist politics niti ka constructivist politics kana identity maraka chu khutsukulai oina men chang for political mobilization kana chu we can do essentialism men chang yar chu we want to claim our uniqueness kana chu maraka chu identity huai we also construct we go on changing. Today Komrem, tomorrow Rem, tomorrow something else. We go on constructing as time passes because identity is an entity, is a phenotype. Science and it's a phenotype. It interacts with any evolution and it interacts with the environment changes, and this phenotype has to struggle it out. Atuna coronavirus yani nga kini pulan hailan tanunga gandriya. Coronavirus si Wuhan virus hong pek lai kana akong kan atuna chu mutate alai tu change atlo ya nyak si here tunu ina Wuhan virus ru galai jangan jo tuna Pfizer Moderna niti atuna ini India Covishield niti Covaxin niti na tha tarsi kate ta kan kina a phenotype kan change mutate atlo ya kan aring na akachang. In fact the principle for this principle was first found out by Charles Darwin iti pahi evolutionary theory the world all over study about him amahi Anglican priest like chang ta ka voice like say hin amahi scientist and like 3 day amahin konga hin ma life hi how tan lai je khawlai kan chu pra debate in Pathan and Assam ma even Pathan in the beginning was the word any chapter 1 ani po and the word was God, and God said, "Let there be." Nita nipa kate Genesis. Kawa theory kla atuna evolutionary theory niti there was slight contradiction. So kina in Charles Darwin atong ihin chu. Hai kunga hin malai ma hong nitin chu. It comes from amoeba from amahi fossil hai study atok na chu. Agatugunang sia Sumutruan se na kate study on theory ai gate ai pai hin ong maradin as life is you it begins from simple to complex ati simple nitin jo aku ngate kat kenain aku belalok abran sinya ong gecang life niti jo ngakan grow ato ata ong ai ta ka amahin akre ka yar jo kebelaikan theological imaka perspektif ka lan yara kena life and death ka treat yara kana ahi terma ada ka te ka document ta ka asak pahin publish and drawing ka document ka a book raming hi survival of the fetus and survival of the fetus amadati to life evolution se life hinga nang se evolution hin ka wasunguna life akhring tarpa so akangar per pa fetus survival of the fetus nang natak ngaren ju atuna coronavirus na natak ngaren je thimakti ka survival of the fetus but actually Charles Darwin tu pahi anthropology se khat ka change ko ka kai lo man hadong and study control hin kai ni hin debate on trong kana chu conference om hin ya gu ima MP um siong hin hong ya ran wa ten sa kam Indian atu pa ba chu Charles Darwin tu pa chu aman I think at kam as the survival of the fetus atin arth tak ama apu pa na lai I ka haima atin chu hingati. It is not survival of the fetus. It's not that the strongest person with a big muscle lives. It is the person who can adapt niti adjust atothai asin rawang anum ati chang rawang anum no atak sakalan khanga ka chang mak ati amada tini evolution hai some life species mayam ka hong in chu all those species that they were able to adapt and change atuna dinosaur niti ya atuna dinosaur humak yam tua atak lanta ka change introtar ta tuna an ba coronavirus ini hitwang hanim ni mutar ba kasin tika mahi virus organism you can see only through the microscope ta ka hitwang maglan the whole world is on their knees, the whole world is inside the house. You cannot imagine the power of that energy. That is the life principle gati ka example ga identity hna kai taman dan hin ani ko kom yes we are small kasin mati chu ma population wise kasin me tak we are like any other identity struggling finding its way out. It is very normal situation like in kina notice context the way how colonial structure came to not notice and how different states were made. State antong samhin atuna constitution ong samya khawsung kan scheduled tribe, scheduled caste, 5th schedule, 6th 7th schedule, article 37 hong samatam hin. Constitution hin khana tribal ima structure ka change ong or disturb ong reorganization of the ethnicity in TA. Khana in fact any kom katar why hai ne kan ripu hin and mane melung hui mak katame especially from Komrem any nipu nipa hin and mane melung hui mak katam ima any nipu nipa tepa kerung amane kan hai mat tidichu kabalai kan he was one of the main person who did that survey of the population in Manipur, especially in the foothill areas. Amahin hai malai to se in the way tribe he kom kanida se ai mo ka ty patkating he alai thuna yar tu kina government facility kan ni factor na sikwa ka alai mandana alai thuna ka kan khawa ka be sam kusanga to ni state identity in kina lalboy nang in state identity ka alek te rimak se ka matang ka very fundamental khawa chung no akan state identity as a politics Manipur anjari atuna Manipur politics in Haimantalai to British Haimantalai to they wanted to move the whole group into 3 categories: Nagas, Kukis, or Meiteis. They wanted to organize all things, push them together under this 3 ethnic group. Now that is very complex. Colonial game ni ka attract namak colonial game and mani British say maina attract namak inkina life kan tu diversity kam kan and mani in even Naga anti and mani concept kati kan chu kuki niti man ka Bengali word kati mai lai rap mai lai kam hai ta ka kawa in thumkar hin tumin nan yaw mo in chu kawa state it is a larger state politics. And after that, of course, this gave rise to, because state law it gave rise to many other ethno-politics. Now we have huge, like beginning with the Nagale movement, right from 1918. It became so powerful, it gave rise to so many other movements. You can imagine, it's so complex. Kawayara kan, kay chunu, kay tamandana chu, ainin atuna, ainin hingan behave nitrohi. Hay sa mo ay mo la hingan, hay sa mo ko man behave nitrohi. And manika niman chat mag Isaac. There is a larger structure that controls. They cannot help themselves. No. Kana kawa no atuna Naga niti chu constitutional category in changi gate anu. Kuki niti kam constitutional category in changi gate. Komrem niti jo constitutional category mencangtar unless ni P Marian aman ama MP in jangan kawa influence kan atau Komrem ni tribe a scheduled tribe constitutionally recognized on thentar rencang jo hay no mati no any politics will make a very different, but as long as this, but I don't think in the near future IR to politically need to know politics need to defined by electoral politics, which means it is a number game, and you nowhere Mary Kom parliament member kachangi, it is just an accident. It is an accident because of her work and her career. It just came out of the blue like this. We have not voted for her. So it goes by number game. Even in Manipur, any number like we don't have any space for that. But kina any pool nang in argument nang kau kan kawanok point kan nang ta kai sino irang nang in argument nai tro hin ikina confusion nang same hin nang in katana ngai ria na sa pa ma tu mung kat question dar nang hi ka cookie sama naga sama and the tan dar another man as kai cookie jam in nagam jam oh ka jang chu nang hi jo pathan sa che you are a Christian. I am not a Naga, I am not a Kuki, but I am a Christian. Now look at this proposition. We have to be slightly, as an intellectual group, very careful. We have to problematize. Research niti as thinkers, we have to think deeper. We have to take our mind to the level. Now, NACN and Mani project was the first project to talk about Nagaland for Christ. Christ for Nagaland. Now, of course, in your whole understanding about your discussion about Lalboy kahi masat nasan jamang do his discussion can improve. It is one my viewpoint. You may disagree, okay? You may disagree, and you may disagree. Ka ikina theological identity natika you pitched it against the ethnic identity. Now the question is, what is this ethnic identity? You took it away to a very negative. For me, would be how do you centralize, how do you center the ethnic identity in theology? Achang mo enjo Christian nan chang enjo atuna you are a foreigner. Na as a Christian, you have a different culture, but tomorrow you have to claim constitutional category. There are also other problems, but nevertheless, know this religion is so crucial to give us that empowers us. But when we are talking about identity politics out there in the socio-political context with Maitais and other people, we have to push ourselves with a proper category. Now, Christian has brought education, they have empowered us, and we are in a better manner to fight. This is our social capital. Therefore, we have to be very, we have to position perspective, that is, that will help us to get a better power position. So, kay taman dana jo ikina nang proposition ka, of course, it is one way of looking religiously, beautifully, but when it comes to socio-political kawa perspective, it will have a problem, especially when it comes now that you have all this RSS, Hinduism, BJP. It will have a big, contestation between that. So you will have to know how do you pitch against that. So for me, I will say I am a tribe. I claim myself as a tribe. I am a Kom tribe, nothing else. I sing my, of course, you will laugh at me. Any situation, I am who I am because I am a Kom tribe. I am because I'm a Christian. My Kom tribe is my first identity, my Christian identity. The rest of the identity comes later. Now, if you remove your Kom identity and put a Christian as a first identity, tomorrow they will not give you a constitutional category, and that becomes, again, it will disempower you. So that is the complicated. So one has to think identity is very, very complex. That is the first thing. Apart from, of course, I put down many things, but that's one first thing that I picked up in the way how you made an argument, and systematically you made an argument. And in fact, you went on to further to say, a point kada I mean nay ri matang ka kam I mean Komrem mi tuma ni identity tuma nay ri kan. And then we have a history, we have a culture. You have actually that part, you did it very well. I wanted to do more research on that. You know? Any man lukusun niti kena tu ini kena nanti himi yang kawa actually that is a big gap. We need to put down and put a volumes on that. Kawa ngara jangan jenuh. Atuni I can claim myself as a tribe. The base, we have not done much research, though we are talking about other identity politics, but the main thing that we are supposed to talk, still now we are not talking. My cultural expert, she has done on culture. She should lead us to produce documents and build our base. Nipu any intellectual mihin, document published nito tarwa English wang nito tara. So that we become like, our discourse become like any other discourse in the world. Not like we are afraid of fighting each other. We cannot talk each other. You know, this is a crisis. This is very sensitive. No, it's not that way. Life goes on. Life is of all of this, including the fights and the deaths. I mean, of course, I'm not, propagating on that. But there is one thing that you said, which I slightly disagree with you when you talk about the land. Nangin land na magmanati. Mi hayrama ka manati ko. Alek kawa point to huitak ni magata reduce natron then because land is so fundamental for defining a tribe. Otherwise, you will become a refugee. A person who doesn't have a tribe without a land is a refugee. Now, the question is, are the Koms without land? How have we occupied these foothills? History it is basically, we are a smaller groups. Kina kamha hai niti hai kaka lusai hai cheap hai kan. Any ram alai ka matlai shoot matlai hong me. Atuna I mol nilai ti hai hi ching hai hi lusai hilai niti hai. Sanwa mai no story di pun pa story yang ba. They've been pushed. Why? Actually, we are the first comers. In fact, if you read some of our like any pu mangpu writing and any Manipur sunga and Pal sunga ang gusuk matam and then kan hong suk e khur pui ba any pai sunga kamyata. I are to any claim we are an indigenous tribe of Manipur, nothing else. And my identity is a Kom, and my I am recognized by the Constitution. I have my strength in the Constitution of India. That is my strength. And now you tell me to become a Naga Kuki. Now, of course, because of the dynamics of the politics, some have become martyrs of peace. And in Komrem, some have become martyrs. I would say them, they are martyrs for coexistence. Martyrs of peace. Nobody talks about this. We are afraid of talking. They are martyrs, nothing less. Ayar and Manin. In Bukana, non-violence can Madu Yar can Manin like actually, now I'm coming to the point. The location, the political location, cultural location that the Koms, or especially when we come Koms, I have to say, actually it is fundamentally connected with so many other smaller groups, which I generally refer to as a Ram. We have a similar historical experiences. We have a similar cultural practices. We have a similar political location. We have a similar standpoint. It's because of the politics played by some of these larger structures like Naga and Kuki. This got bifurcated and became more complicated. But actually, what is important is any defenders of peace, any defenders of principle, man. What is this principle? We protect diversity. We protect diversity. We stand for diversity, and we stand against any colonial activity. We stand against domination. We stand against violence. You can imagine. I have been trying to write and talk about our political identity or a political perspective of the Koms for so many years. People appreciate us. Today, especially today, look at the way how US controls the whole world. They will kill anyone who you know who comes on their way for getting out the mineral resources. The world is so. If you talk about human right, yes, definitely we are defenders of human right. Even if we are a single person, we should know Gandhi was the one single person who defended. You know, who drove away because of his leadership. The British were taken out from India and became independent in 1947. So, argument it was kina any land, land. We are part of the land. Our identity and land are very different now. Kahin infal hin ku pai kan ram gim so in ka ko in ka mang ju. What does it mean? I'm dislocated. Mumbai kamanu maying ka thile ju land sing here and then tracing here. So it is fundamentally connected. Land, territoriality, culture, and identity are fundamentally connected. That's how they, and we have to defend this position. And mind you, the beauty is that this is protected by the Constitution of India, Article number 371C, including the Village Authority Act 1956. Although, of course, some of them are debating, especially cookies are debating on this act, but Combs defends, we stand by the state. Kaya tomorrow, amak mara bagate hypothesis kada. Ay buk na ay kinagan de kon magatlan se. I'm not going to run in Senapati. I'm not going to run in Chuchanpur. I will run towards Infal. I will run towards the state. Kawiyara kan hay many toshing it is kay chunu. Atuna youngster, especially my target is youngster. You go out, don't worry about identity politics. Study, you know, get into jobs, become bureaucrats, get that space like the Jews who are running America. Now the whole financial structure is under the hand of the Jews today. We all know this. Let them move towards, instead of, you know, fighting among ourselves. No, that's why any RAM intellectual community, a lot of, you know, career counseling, research, student abroad. We should go to study abroad. How many students? My students are studying in London school. How many are studying in Oxford? How many are studying in Harvard University? How many are studying in Australia? Tuma atun ko pa ni kom kat. In your ma foreign sitar na study ni to ang lema theorize ni to any political theory. It becomes a part of the world, larger political theory. Anyway, this is a huge debate. I'm just trying to, for me, we need to focus on the, of course, religion is one fundamental thing, but don't say religion is the base. Say tribe is the base and religion is other identity that has come. That's how, of course, Lalboy, nangisu theological thing, and Tanyan to Kantingan Maya, Taka. As a researcher, as a sociologist, I would make an argument in that line of thought. No? Hinong kami taka ka point elect awat kam ka nung ting discuss ni tlo no mayaya kan timasena in parking ka kahri retip ka train nung hiya kam no kan kamera gata jam ta kai fully ka reading ka tlo hidom sigmo gata kada nam mai kai opinion disnelo
pa kom tun khan Professor Alex nangin ngoja pu khan kathata analyze itwa ngoja pu lalboy presentation ka pa kom here khana ha hinom chu an hot nan kya changinom topic is very important ka chang khawya khan abana she na ori second presentation hi ngoja pu ke ni aman hang pik na ori ama phai
kulai koi dikhenga kakarin thai mo
in thai
okay ini kim kan tinin kan sa party 10 to 15 minutes at ikene kainum concisely I will try to go within that time frame khavyara kan kai topic kai tri sig I have removed the historical part. I have to pulal boy kan historical part ka like focus I topic human kya kai topic raming the politics of strategy and alignment of marginalized tribes of Manipur, focusing on Kom tribe of Manipur. Kana kai topic hai moniti chanchu. I will not focus too much on the identity part, but I would like to be objective in my paper and try to bring out how small marginalized tribes become politically viable in absence of huge numbers, or in the absence of electoral politics. I need electoral politics aga yaw tarmo yo man kane I khana mo any zat kasin mani politically viable aga changman khaba topic kairi sik changke. I will try to use some English as well as com mix kai to sik I also ka paper kati English ani to sun kane some of the words I won't be able to translate into com khaver kan com le English strong mix ai to sana hairi barang atringa kai paper hin sometimes I will use the word they, third person no they any kara ka common ke taka surprise ai chang pigmaru chang mole often ai chang pigmaru here to they kai ti phale. It's according to the I'm trying to make the paper viable for other readers also. When I say they, it doesn't mean I'm trying to offend the community. I'm also part of the they kana ka chang kene. So my paper I would like to bring it out into 4 parts. Aman kai pen introduction ka chang sik. Second part akan conceptual framework. Kana third part akan the alignment and the strategies that Kom tribe use to become politically viable. And fourth part akan conclusion kachang sikke. Here a 4 part in I will try to conceptual part in I like basic air to any identity like politics ka. I want to bring out what are the problems we have and how best to derive a solution out of it. And the third part akan alignment of strategies kan any economic politically viable in chang thainasi strategies nita mangka kairi suchi okay. I will try to read out some of from the paper and then try to I need to kai hap sanu mayam chu kairi si ka changke. So let me start in Komrem any Rem intellectual collective Rem intellectual forum any hibu part ni kaya rakan. So I'll start with my paper presentation. This paper will try to analyze the political viability of small ethnic groups or tribes who are marginalized and numerically small. This analysis is important because the whole political discourse in the Northeast is dominated by the politics of dominant tribes or ethnic groups. In Manipur especially, the politics of the hills is dictated and dominated mainly by the Naga groups of tribes or the Kuki group of tribes. However, there are certain tribes who are not affiliated with any of the dominant conglomerate tribes, the Naga or the Kukis. This paper will particularly study one such tribe of Manipur, Kom, who has no representation at the state legislative assembly or the district council. The population of the Kom tribe and their dispersed location throughout the 4 hill districts of Manipur become a disadvantageous position for the tribe in a competitive electoral politics. The lack of institutional arrangements and failure of existing ones like autonomous district council led to further marginalization of the small tribes. This paper set out to explore the politics of this tribe in charting different trajectories of democratic participation. For this tribe, democratic participation can serve to expose uncertainties and information not considered during decision-making processes and can bring unrecognized alternatives and solutions to problems. The conceptualization of democratic participation in this paper is based on the non-electoral form of political participation. This paper will attempt to show that to be politically viable, the tribe has carved out different strategies and alternatives of political participation to tackle exclusions inherent in electoral politics, finding the need for vigorous advocacy on behalf of the marginalized tribes and the importance of a politics which can open up a wider range of options. Kai introduction ka kaitari no mingkha chu aini hi jat kasin manke migato manke kana chu districts manlia inchai pat manke takha any identity politics sanum kachang, but we need to remain viable in a democratic framework. No, any hinting a state demand some underground organization in this sema cover part ka kai and morning, but I want to focus on the formal channels within the democratic framework. Cover kan kai kadi nunchu any political viability ni chang kan there we have chalk out two channels. One is the formal channels and the other one is the informal channels. Cover ka chu akin can explain the topic, so here is just the introduction part ka chang anu. So from this paper, I want to bring out three important questions. First question, can small tribes be politically viable in the absence of a conducive institutional politics? Second question, what are the limits and scope of democratic participation in an ethnically diverse state like Manipur? Third question, what political means are employed by small tribes or ethnic minorities for effective political participation? Here are three questions. He will come back again and again in my paper. We will try to answer some of this paper. And here paper it's a part of my PhD synopsis. You know, it's a work in progress. There are so many problems you'll find when I'm presenting. Especially, I would like to hear from OLX, Ulalboy, kana Uday Soning, Inikim. Nangiyan po inum kainum gata madukya. So that I want to refine on my research. I want to do more refined process of this my PhD synopsis. Now, okay. So Manipur is one of the states in Northeast region with a high degree of cultural diversity. A number of ethnic groups reside in the region, giving rise to a unique ethnic socio-political environment. Political processes motivated by ethnic identity become a prominent mobilization strategy for ethnic groups to negotiate for space within a democratic frame or sometimes out of it. This process manifests itself in self-determination movements expressed in the form of independence movement and also in demands for separate state, which is vividly observed among tribes in Manipur. However, not all ethnic groups can manage to have a strong political voice or assert their demands. The process of political assertion based on identity has tremendous political and social impact on distinct identities of the varied ethnic groups. The impact of the processes related to the interplay of identity politics is felt much more by numerically fewer communities who are also geographically sparsely populated and spread out across districts. In this particular context, this paper will try to answer what happened to those minor ethnic groups and what strategy do these groups use to locate and position themselves differently vis-a-vis the dominant ethnic groups. It will also try to conceptualize the very process of political organization among the numerically small tribes to be politically assertive. The electoral politics prevalent there means that the distribution of power is limited to only those who will numbers. Political power is therefore in favor of bigger communities or tribes with big population. It is also along this line that the tribes in Manipur are aligned. Lucy J. Hall, in the authoring, any Manipura tribes in the classification in Thuma Athanke. The first group, the Naga group of tribes. Second group, the Chin Kuki Mizo group of tribes. And the third, the intermediary group of tribes. Cover intermediary group of tribes kan any Komrem tribe, kindred tribes kana anal chothe lamkang anati alalak nung kayaw manke cover kan any three specifications in agayaw manke akin kan OLX na mighty okay colonial binary construct, you know, any whole of Manipur ni ana to it's the tribal versus the Meiteis. Chingani an to the Kuki versus the Nagas. Taka any kakoman zakasin manchu we are neither part of this binary constructs, whether it is the construct of the colonial construct or the construct of the Indian state. We are not neither part of the construction. Khaba point ke kai paper in tanum chu any khaba construct man binary construct man try any akir kan ako man aka kan ako man ni ai khonamo ni ring na sik ni to nu Kachang, okay. So that is the bigger part of my introductions. Now I would like to come to the conceptual framework. In this conceptual framework, I want to look at I am also focused on morning, but I want to also look at what identity is. First part now, and second part now, I want to look at what are the academics or portions of academics that are lacking in the democratic framework, which does not conceptualize or which does not include marginalized tribes, or which does not include minorities among minority tribes, communities. So first part, conceptual framework I want to look at what identity is. And second part, I will come to the politics part of that identity. So identity from the perspective of ethnicity is very often considered as basic given of an identity in social science. This understanding has very often confined the conceptualization along exclusivist approach within primordial school of thought. Hiva school of thought in Gertz is one of the proponent. Gertz in ability to identity or our ethnicity is inherent. Any identity there are other authors like PART in they are not it's not inherent but it is our interactions with other communities which set boundaries. No? So Bird says, ethnicity is more of a product of interaction rather than reflecting essential qualities inherent to human groups. His conceptualization is a measured shift from cultural specific studies to a movement focusing on social interactions of boundaries and life processes. This conceptualization has brought in a shift of paradigm in the understanding of ethnicity and given the concept of political dimension. Any cultural identity and put in political identity, ethnicity and political identity. Bart is trying to explain. No? Ethnicity refers to a sense of identity consisting of the subjective, symbolic, or distinctive self-perception of any aspect of culture that defines a group of people. Such self-perceptions of any aspect of culture, such self-perceptions are used by group to create internal cohesion and differentiate from other groups. Groups experience different levels of security in relations to their own and others' perception of the structural power position they are currently in. No? Any ethnicity in any self-perception in that kong, he was self-perception in any me group alang put in different set to nito to ke tinu any amani nito ka puhi any self-perception ni perception ayom yarkan group perception ayom yarkan amani kaini nito tingkat hay kong ke hiva hay sing identity some ethnicity study nito pale election since he's also an author of an article amain hay moti akin kanu malali sa okay ethnicity is a political process asang is a circumstantial product or an instrument. Akina election notice okay any ethnicity any identity is instrument could lie in that case. So any even dan tayo to kind of very agree to okay I to have identity he could lie in it. So in what form in a political field to economic nitamang ka akin kay risik. So kabaka identity part na kay risik sig aka atun su political part akan highlight no ang conceptual framework akan no Iris Marion Young and Atike ama lekha justice and the politics of difference atati democratic procedures in participatory democracy do not lead to just outcomes because allowing all affected people to participate in social discussions can result in serious injustice when groups have conflicting interests and differ in numbers and privilege. Iris Marian Young in Atike, any democratic process nito palin, it is not mirakip siga fair sang Atike, ayatu mirakip hi nitamadu alapat, kanasu nimasing num alab kom, kanasu any privilege nitanay within the society kawan alap aga changke khawya rakan even though we live in one democratic framework, the outcomes hichu alap pat keti no. While marginalization definitely entails serious issues of distributive justice, it involves the deprivation of cultural, practical, and institutionalized conditions for exercising capacities in a context of recognition and interaction. The fact of marginalization raises basic structural issues of justice, in particular concerning the appropriateness of a connection between participation in productive activities of social cooperation on the other hand, and access to the means of consumption to the other. This is what happens in Manipur, where all dominant groups usurp most of the legislative seats, leaving those numerically less groups without any participation and marginalized. Second, N. Phillips in Amalekha, The Politics of Presence Arike. N. Phillips considers whether a case for ensuring the equal representation of women and men or proportionate representation of ethnic minority groups can be extracted from the twin principles of political equality and control. It argues that it is necessary to move beyond this to an alternative justification grounded in existing structures of political exclusion. A number of contemporary democracies have introduced measures to ensure a more equitable representation of women or ethnic minority citizens within elected assemblies. These measures have included gender quotas in the selection of parliamentary candidates and the use of race-conscious districting to increase the electoral chances of ethnic minority representatives. N. Phillips in Amalekha, The Politics of Presence at the TK, any democratic principles, political equality, some political control, amana TK, hiva political equality, political control, we cannot subsume or we cannot generalize totem manatike. Ayarsu, hiva political equality, political control, any mirki panaimak manatike. Hiva political equality or political control, some countries alternative in anyong sada antoyo ke India, for example, any certain MP, MLA taka dito urban municipal council hay election achu gender quotas ni dapi goike. Even in some countries are like in Europe and yanasanum amaninum gender achang makle gender quotas and kakpio. In some states of America, where the black minorities hay katam hay achang magle, Latin American hay katam hay jaga achu amani ka delimitation and topic hay seat reserve and topic hay etike and topic hay. Drawing on a distinction between the politics of ideas and the politics of presence, this book explores and defends the case for such measures. The politics of ideas considers accountability in relation to declared policies and programs and sees the sex or race of the representative as a matter of relative indifference. In the politics of presence, by contrast, the gender or ethnic composition of elected assemblies become a legitimate matter of democratic concern. So I need reality in the politics of presence and other thing. I need race, I need ethnic composition he darkar kachang heratike. I also it's a part of the democratic concern. I need democratic framework in thaya common community in sangyara. I need ethnicity. I need identity ka important kachang herati. She addressed the concern that the case for political presence could encourage essentialist understanding of group identity or group interest. Akina awo election ito tigapu in political theory, essentialist theory of identity ito tigapu kan. Hiva alternative in kan yung padahin. Hiva any essentialist agachang theory in kan darkar kachang atike. Hivahin any group identity asang male group interest hi. Hivahin analyze topic sigman hivahin any group any specify nito pala com identity asang male com interest hi amain ay an sigman ati. It argues against an either or alternative between the politics of ideas and the politics of presence, and for a new combinations of these two models of representation. Arguments are important in the context of a demand for proportionate representation for ethnic minorities, especially since the tribes in question, which is Kom tribe, do not have any representation. However, it is inadequate when the ethnic minorities are minority within minorities. Proportionate representation already does exist for the dominant ethnic minorities in Manipur, while the marginalized remain outside the ambit. I think Manipur electoral politics ni anpale akin kanu Manipur as a state ni anpale there is a binary construct of the hill versus the valley. No, kan kabakan ini ke yaw yoman itu tike. Tak when we look at the politics of the hills, kabakan ni pupale su again the binary construct form. Okay, the Naga politics and the Kuki politics. Again, any kabaka part kan yaw moment. So in the existing frame of academics, any academics na mayam hain antasun leka ni anpale kan they talk about proportionate representations of minorities. No, taka they don't talk about proportionate representation of minority within minorities. Kava shortcomings ke iba kay paper in ata anumchu minority of minorities thaya ko minority hechu amani theory cho hemako or atung chu kai understanding a lo okay hiva understanding nai thaina sika kai semke atuna conceptual framework nu. So that is the part of my conceptual framework, which tries to look at identity from a Kom perspective, and also look at the politics. What are the existing academics on proportionate representations or democratic participation? Kana any cover part akan agayaw man. We our assertion of our identity is politics. One part of that assertion is politics agayaw. You know, any cover assertion akan it can be a cultural, it can be a theological. Akina pu alalboy no may topi oman kay ama ama focus ay to any theological perspective of Komrem identity. No, but what I'm trying to look here in my paper is the political side of that identity. Cover identity assertion kani ang pala politics ay kaya okay. Cover politics ka ekana mo ini inday maniti ka. I will try to bring out in my paper. In the beginning, I need politically viable nisang kan a channel ini okay, the formal channel and the informal channel. No, informal channel it is unto I need vote near term election near term. We know the reason why. I need vote aggregator maximum. We don't have the numbers. No, in simple terms, we don't have the numbers. Alala kachu side comments na. I need electoral politics Manipur even India election near we need to have numbers. So I need a common to we don't have the number. So what are the high chain I can high informally I can more politically viable politically relevant formally informal at the ticket. So let me start out with the formal. My papers might be a little bit subjective, objective. This I think is a opinion. You can always object to my opinion. Formal channel formal channel has to do something to do with the state or people who are part of the state structure. No, it can be a judge, it can be an administrative officer, it can be a clerk, it can be a teacher. No, any formal channel hin economo relevant agachang thai man kha kai like haidirong. While the tribes may be assertive of their individual cultural identity, politically they are divided into two conglomerates, the Nagas and the Kukis. However, there are certain tribes which do not fit into these political categories. Their identities, be it cultural or political, are therefore more ambiguous and changing. Yesterday we were Komrem, today we might be something else, in the future we might be. So I need identity which are political, cultural, it's very ambiguous. Fix and it's ever changing links are they belong to a minority within minorities and are marginalized. Any politically, obviously, no one can refrain from saying that we are politically marginalized. The small tribes organize themselves. The Kom tribes organize themselves autonomously and assert a positive sense of their cultural and experiential specificity. The very process of political organization started after independence for fear of being assimilated into other tribes, which fostered the development of their identity and cultural expression. Akina, I will not be focusing too much on this part. Akina, historical part. I have to pulal boy historical part. Akina mo Komrem Union form ito. Akina mo student union form ito. Akina mo any political consciousness ka. Akina mo hen put tika. Akin kan aribi oman. Okay. Just add that to nung chu. Hiva political consciousness ni akina mo competition chu independence ni himulim halakan. I need nito treat na inkan om yara. I have to zat kalian hen ini assimilate and toma na amani zat karat and manjau sing man treat yara kan. I need consciousness ako honga. I need nipping up politically assert ni to ni put kinu. It began only after independence. Attachment to specific traditions, practices, language, and other culturally specific form is a crucial aspect of their social existence. Any kakoman, since I'm focusing on the Kom tribe, kakoman itinum any mountain trong, sagang trong, hin trong, nitrong in nangpat in sang. It's not an absolute one language that we all speak. We use little variations of the language. Any cultural ni enpale ni lam, especially any lam, kanacho any luhong asanga, any cultural traditions, some customary law ni enpale like variations akompat ke. Takahiva variations he nito dalan na any inkatman nito ti hintesin. It's a part of that political assertion. You know, I mean, I'm on nito tisik. Nindang mag na kanita dalan na nindang na kanita yung katino makino kan cheno ene pa writer in haimo teacher chu minority cultural assertions like minority political assertions are subordinated to the elitist or upper class or class ideologies atike any minority man hinati assert ni to pale any cultural he assert to pale it's amanati it's a part of that political assertion ke taka any cover cultural assertion mo asang male political assertion mo ni to pale any ka zat kalen hen asang magle group kalen hen any ka subordinate anto manantike and the reason is because I need that in an electoral politics where we don't have any say in the legislative matters or political matters any ka subordinate anto mana any assertion asang male any cultural assertion asang male political assertion ka subordinate kasang manakan marginalized kasang sa common ke akina katipu kan since we have that I'm trying to bring out that political viability kya any common channel in inimam ke the formal channel and the informal channel ka informal channel akina ma common ka kai ito san orang for small tribes who are pushed as minorities in electoral politics they will attempt to make themselves politically viable by trying to appropriate power through the process of decision making. I need electoral politics and yautar mo sang inum power kachu assert ito tonum ke power kachu nitama duke ka yung nutiyong ke kaba ka kana power hiva power initiyong tisan chu legislative level decision making as ang minum at least in the state katitihin it's not just Manipur state katitihin it's a state as a body of a body with a proper territory with a proper nationality khawa thaya kom sunga kan decision making part formal channel kan akana ba ini decision making part akan agyaw man khawa process akan formal channel ha kya okay decision making here does not mean legislative decision making but other kinds of decision making involving government administrators judges bureaucrats civil society civil servants etc. Hiva decision making katitihin I mean government thaya tungato hai theory nu ayampa ayachu government thaya MLA samal MP nitna mo kane wangchana okay Medicom is an exception because she was nominated and M Chumpanum last autonomous district council Kayauke, but again he was not elected, he was nominated. So in any form of electoral politics, we have had no space. However, he decision making it's not the decision making in the legislative matters, but decision making by those who are part of the state and who are involved in decision making of the state, like government administrators, judges, bureaucrats, civil servants. No? Small tribes will seek to get placements in these forms of decision makers. Hinati trun nitayom no trun nitayonga government servant agasang mana decision making akayaw mana decision making ni yaw phalekan aini zat sig hai minute to thai aini zat hai an problem anai phalekan as a decision maker I cannot solve to thai example it is to it might be very silly example, but pu kailo nitanai ke no aini he's one of the senior most IPS officer in Manipur. Amahi part of the state case, state I mean economic nitamang yerke. It may not be basically part of decision making, big decision making is something miga theo, miga nayo, hinting sang the tang name yo, even ku ini nang yo hay nitipalet amahi nitiyong wat niki. So people like him, who is part of the state, plays a very important role in the decision making process of the state, also is able to help out the communities in whichever way he can. No small example electoral politics may not level the field in terms of elected representative, but reservation of seat in government jobs and education allowed small tribes to level the field in terms of access to jobs that lead to decision making. Even any benefit in economic within the state in the reservation policy and I think in terms of access to higher education and in terms of access to jobs. I mean, malu kalutaga. I need zak kasin manke. I need kasahin compare and tori manani zak kasin mansu. I cannot see more. IAS num nai IPS num nai akung kataya government service num kalutak tree. Antikenu. So what I wanted to say in this paper is that there is an inherent thought that lives in all the Kom community. Kom community and zak kasin manke. Tak niti tosik ke. Kita niti tosik ke. So in that process of getting higher education and in that process of getting jobs that lead to decision making, it is actually what I wanted to say is a political step. I also need to steps to keep he political hakiyaur manke. I mean, also pu kailun hai, pu song boy hai, officer in itna kana dung hai niti nailen thang niti pala. They are individuals in themselves, but any identity assert nito pala. That is part of the political process. They may not be a political people. Government service they cannot be openly political. But this is all part of the formal channel of political process. Officially and background what they lack in number, they put in resolve so much so that the desire to be decision makers is the focus of small tribes. I need to vote ngiri, election ngiri, what other alternatives nitanay? Lekakana tairi, no IAS sangri, IPS sangri, judge sangri, no assistant professor sangri, niditya kawakantinga diversion. Inherent that is because we don't have a political resolve because we know we don't have the numbers. So alternative in decision making there is a concerted effort by the civil society groups of the tribes like churches, youth groups and cultural political bodies to encourage students and provide incentives to get jobs in the state civil services or Indian civil service. They believe that being part of the decision-making process will make them politically viable. Inherent quality we are being encouraged by the state civil servants. We are encouraged by the churches. We are encouraged by the student union. We are encouraged from every angle to seek those jobs that will lead to decision-making. He part and process I mean one of the steps to realize that to become politically viable through not through electoral politics, but through other alternative means, and which particularly here is the official channel. No, state process akan part of the state agsang mana decision making agayaman ka politically viable state katinum ke. Second part, informal channel. Informal channel in community informal channel in, let me just informal channel in, we have Komrem Union, we have KRBCA, Komrem Student Union, we have the chieftainship, and we have the neutral strategy. First, the neutral strategy kan idea ora kan pulal boy na may repeat oman kana supu election article kan asun yuke kana pu Jimmy laiban nu amanum ini hiva neutral perspective sa hingya an repeat oman hiva neutral perspective hi monetization chu. Look, right after independence, any political consciousness come, okay, but we have never had a political standing entity in like it's just a political consciousness. It's more to do with cultural and religious assertion. No, KRBC form naito, Komrem Union form naito assertion agachangke, but political standing in till the point of the Naga Kuki ethnic crisis, early 90s. I need Komrem, or if I can use interchangeably, topic Kom community. No, I also Komrem Union and they put strategy ka. I need Kom community. No, it's the same thing. For the first time after independence, we have our own political standing in I need neutral strategy. He neutral strategy and put in economic political standing. I like the the political stance of the Kom identity remains resilient even in the midst of majority-minority identity politics in a time when larger political identity process became not only a mere self-identification but forceful categorization. OLX or co-option by the larger identity politics. There is constant defining and redefining of numerically fewer tribes manifested through oscillation of identity on political consideration. In such reality, Komrem identity has been a strategy of political assertion within the politics of coercive categorization. This strategy was observed in the neutral stance taken by the community during the ethnic conflict in the 1990s. The community has always demonstrated a cultural and political ability to negotiate in relation to the politics of its immediate larger ethnic group within the paradigm of coexistence and peaceful living. Here quotation he Jimmy Levan pulal boy mati okay hayaramo any hiva political neutral strategy hayaramo we use the principle of coexistence and peaceful living in political assertion in political standing in neutral strategy in the assertion he okay if most of the scholars who are studying Komrem or Kom I think should be familiar with the OLX article Kanachu Laivan Jimmy article. We don't have too many authors, they are the only two authors, and the third one is Pulal Boy. We look at it and we came to know that neutral strategy in the emerging circumstance of ethnic processes along national and homeland territory, such as Nagalim and Jaliangab. The reality of the marginalized tribes highlight the unique discourse of ethnicity, nationality, and territoriality defined by very much by the lived experience. Ini niringna nitamalarsa kapu kan ini hiva Nagalim le Jalengam Kuki le Naga politics demand for separate state as demand for independent state. Hiva insunakar hin ini makara vanthar mantia. Amaninum Naga politics, Kuki politics, no America and Van Yaunu Mankinu. I remember some years ago, Nagaland Nagaland, Indonesian Hay money, calendar Akanum, any Kakom Antaman Yaumankinu. Zalengam Akanum, Zalengam, even the PS money Keno Hain and this one, they can't Mia Tia Raminga, I need to come a Timan, Amani and Hake, Arsomani and Tevani, Cookie Sake, Cookie Tiake. So we are trying to be forcefully co-opted OLX term in that categorization. Categorization force under to cover nitan suit in group in lower, but to strive on the principles of coexistence and peaceful living, and political standing in nairi niya cover to neutral strategy. This is one step where we become small community like us become political viable. No, hiva standing in atun katungan ay nilagring man ke the Komrem atun to some of the Komrem kindred tribes kachu kani nagayo on the tiga kayaw yo hay kani kiyo on the tiga yo hay. So in this confusing political environment, any kakom manchu, you're saying that we are neutral. Kani nagam sangmung, kani kukium sangmung, kani su kakomung kani tiya komang kinu. Hiva assertion, strong political assertion he, it's one of the strategy, informal strategy ini nita mangkatin kinu. So that is the neutral strategy. Atunchu kapha no malek henrang yo changa. Akina chieftainship le KRUM le KRBC elected small points are hiding so I conclude before that. So chieftainship I can very important it is true. The tribal inhabited areas of Manipur are not within the ambit of the 6th schedule. Any 6th schedule Indian constitution say Manipur is but alternative however, the areas have some form of administrative autonomy within the Manipur Autonomous District Council Act 1971. No? In this act, issues like land ownership, chieftainship, customary law, mode of membership, and election to the council extra are stated, which provide the tribes a political system which is separate from and different from the state legislative assembly. Even at this political unit, small tribes like Kom are marginalized and have no representation in the district council. However, the act provides some autonomy to the tribes to administer themselves at the village level. This is done so through the chieftainship. A chief usually had a head of body, loosely translated as village authority. So a village authority is a political institution working within a democratic framework. It represents the interests of the whole village and deals with any matter of importance concerning the residents of the village. The village authority has its own power, budget, and personal base. It can drum up political support, obtain consensus, and form institutions or committees to implement schemes or policies of the state. It becomes an important mediator between the state and the people. So, I mean, state legislative assembly kan iomota asanum 6 schedules Autonomous District Council Act on paper, no, we have a certain amount of autonomy of the tribes. They can on real it's just on paper. On real hinya power so in reality village level in Ronda we have our own customary law, no. Mean cut at the throat punishment form of Zanchu vote to Ranga example in Karanu Asang Magle Amahi Akahok motion to excommunicate Lito Hinati certain authority and power tonight. Kavayana can state schemes, state policies on it comes through the village authority or through the chief, no. Hiva informal agachang authority it becomes a very important part of our political process. Chieftainship as a village authority through any state connect agachang manke. The individuals are not connected to the state directly, but only through the state, through the chieftainship or the village authority. I mean, kusuma huinama asangmale o machanchu, we don't go to the police first, no. Any issues arising within the village authority tries to solve it within themselves. So some form of political mobility, some form of political authority based on custom and tradition, village authority or the chieftaincy has, no. So hibahin any example like election election mihain vote ko khom anong phale chu, village authority sits in a meeting, no. Can they said, okay, as through the village authority level, we need to support this candidate or we need to support that candidate in mobilization, political mobilization in they have the authority, they have the budget, they have the minimum, no. So it is through the chieftainship and village authority that the Kom community, even though we are marginalized, we are able to assert some form of political mobility. Next, I want to move on to the Komrem Union Manipur. I will not look too much historical part. I will just try to summarize. The marginalized tribes define and redefine itself consistently to be able to maintain its cultural and political reality in the context of the emerging cultural and political environment. Some of the small tribes in Manipur had also experimented with conglomerating themselves into an entity called the Komrem. I mean, in Chunman entity, it's just not the Nagas or the Kukis, and we have experimented with it, no? With the Komrem, can experiment it. Okay, has it failed? Has it succeeded? It's an open interpretation for us. But I know, aga sintik man ke nibing ading termak man, any strong standing kan inay tayo na signati anong conglomerate in Chunman na experiment hito. Okay, it's a whole part of the political process. This was done so because of two main reasons. Firstly, the 6 tribes considered themselves to be kindred tribe with a similar historical origin, cultural symbols, and mutually understandable language. Secondly, because of the fear of forceful categorization or co-option according to Alex by dominant tribes. Why some have a Komrem experiment? There are 2 reasons. Because I mean, nindang nale akom kenu. Second reason, akina forceful nagahin at some like kukihin forceful categorizing to man ka kana pun itan su thaina si akan 2 main reasons. I mean, he experiment like okay. The result was the formation of Kom Union Manipur. The Komrem Union Manipur is mandated to play a political role for the tribes it represented. It got further reinforced in context of asserting better political participation, particularly in the autonomous district councils or the state legislative assembly election, and various other emerging internal and external social and political circumstances that constitute the environment of the community. So any political problems, any coup, which cannot be solved at the village authority level or the chieftainship level, it comes to the Komrem Union problems within the village or issue. So political mandate in the even though they are election Komrem is not a constitutional categorization. Constitutional except to category I need 6 tribes they can power some sort of political power where they will be able to represent us at the level not just political or at the social or political level which no other groups can. No? I mean chief issues akan Komrem Union amani political mandate asam social mandate ka amani ka focus on the toke kana ansai na formal channel informal channel hin akina pulal boy num he has focused so much on the Christian perspective of Komrem identity. What I want to bring out a little bit is that how Christianity or Christian any religion in kanihin any cover political consciousness in kanum economic the Kom tribe are predominantly Christian in the belief. I can say that 10% about almost 10% here in Christian. Okay, since religion is an important aspect of everyday life of the villagers, a church become an important power center in the village. Any power center in India. One is the village authority, and the second is the church. Whether we accept it or not, it's a some form of power. No, any political science in June. Okay, power he assertions. Any state in accept or recognize it to a body in law, it can come from so many other means. No, and one of the means is the church. Sometimes the church is more powerful than the village authority. And we'll realize, and that in some villages, the church is much more powerful than the village authority. I also American, it's just not the American social capital and the spiritual capital, because the religious capital influence our social capital. School church in society, any social norms he changed at all. Example in any cultural norms to Jew in a natality. But when the church comes, that change. They can change the social norms. No, Jew in Yamak, Asang Magle, Nisa Sak Yamak. They formed a certain kind of a spiritual, through the spiritual basis, social norms can change. No? So they are a powerful entity in the village. It is mandated. The church is mandated to nourish the spiritual needs of the villagers, but it has an important say and influence in the day-to-day affairs of the village. Every village has a church, and each tribe has their own churches association that work at the state level to coordinate and unite the churches. The church association deals with matters of recognizing teachings of a particular Christian denomination and its ways of life. They regulate the lives of the members within the association. Members who do not conform to the teachings or the Christian ways of life can be excommunicated from the church. One such association of churches is the Komrem Baptist Churches Association that represented more than 100 churches of the 6 tribes. Though KRBCA is a religious institution, their role in mobilizing support of its members, whether for religious activities or conflict resolutions between tribes, is immense. So summarize kaito okay. Concluding part akan hayong yung sana. So what I have talked in my paper I have talked about the conceptual framework of identity part and the political part, and I have drawn out the strategies that Com community use to become politically viable through the formal channel as well as the informal channel. No? In conclusion, in the beginning, I have asked this 3 questions. No? Can small tribes be politically viable in the absence of a conducive institutional politics? I want to say yes. There is always a way that I need alternative in Com community, alternative in politically viable in ways and means. Okay. Second question: what are the limits and scope of democratic participation in an ethnically diverse state like Manipur? Obviously, democratic participation Manipur too. I need Com lived experience in the there are so many limits and scope. No, but cover limitations. Alternative means. Okay. The third question: which political means are employed by small tribes or ethnic minorities for effective political participation? Cover effective political participation in high means the formal channel which is through the decision making of the state or the other channel, which is the informal channel, through the churches, through the chieftainship, through the civil society organization, and through the neutral stand of the Com community. So in conclusion, what I want to say is that the political discourse in Manipur is dominated by major ethnic groups, leaving the minor ethnic groups marginalized socially and politically. The numerically small and marginalized ethnic groups cannot assert themselves through the channels of existing electoral or legislative processes. Therefore, the group devised alternative and crisscrossing trajectories for democratic participation. To be politically viable, the marginalized tribe use both the formal channel of bureaucracy, state administrator, judges, and also informal channels of civil society, church, chieftainship, student group, and cultural group to find alternative means for their political assertion. Kavakari kan atuninga kay paper presentation kasi nga chang yor so pange.
Pakom tunkan Wajapu Kenya bukan iranga yo tukan how to be politically viable in electoral politics in Manipur kachanga ini special reference to Kom tribe kachanga atun cho pha hi Wajapu Professor Alex neng pe no yorong
in Pali Pulen Kenny presentation ai tro kai rangaya chanang kai rangaya gyan hai gitla thai it indicates hard work in India and at the ground reality just try to struggle although man is trying to somehow Komrem concept he is in favor and trying to see take on forward but anyway lot of hard work is there man toy thiming jina hai toy rang ayar sang kinom discussion toy man nakate anu theoretically keni nangin nan sikhi atuna he politics of presence niti political science njuma kate politics of presence or political participation but in the Indian context we also call electoral politics participation in electoral politics and in vote individual it's based on individual voting system we all know this so kanti kan into individual number and we are out of that game in fact he pu kilong bete me te pa karung hai and money 1948 hai ju influential like sang haya ma minister like sang tar kan ju any minister pa a song mam minister like sang tar kawiyar kawalai kan ju in the beginning of the state formation of Manipur we were very influential so we would that time there was no force like Kukis and Naga so at that time we were one of the top so we could influence we could go to that decision making power at the level of legislative body kapa taka tunhin ayana chunu within the framework any Indian government in framework ape hina hini ayana chunu minorities achu amma ayatu kina it depends on number ka changyar kan atuna union achangnum federal state achangnum amakate intenta taka anmanin Indian government in especially 1996 74th amendment is a very important amendment that they brought 1992 actually they inserted an article 243 kan kawakan many ideas have been put in how local participation at the local participation kina kenin tikapo I read what I'm sure I read ya local at the local level kungahin ma atuna smaller tribe hai acha my weaker section hai and money decision making power man yaw sikti pa ka kam kawa any Indian government in Assam tak any Manipur in anin so in that because the whole notice it comes under article 243M 243M that is article that is notice area tribal areas including Manipur hill area they are exempted from 73rd and 74th amendment ayar to any one particular any one state in district council village authority act amyar kan and manen thokpa kabachung kan and ta kabalo kan the so there is no definite policy and in fact we all know in district council act is completely a failure it's not implemented elections are taking place but there is no decision making process I have studied in detail Churachandpur district published gate ka referred lora keni ko ka article ka in detail ka kawana no in study kai loa Tripura and mani district council study ko kana Bodoland atuna Bodon as a region declare and take and mani kumahin Indian government and topic it's very important to see how these areas and the tribal areas in Manipur taka any Manipur areas and kina nationalism Naga nationalism the Kuki nationalism angariya kan ikina political participation taken we are not able to take forward although voting percentage is very high voting times are very high because that is there but theoretically nang theory naiga the framework are very well written but I just want to add 2-3% for you Kakasu nangin Frederick Bart kenapa jang chu at man Leach 1994 papa makyam. Kena chu nangin ima politics of presence, especially when you are talking about minority rights. You cannot, but you have to read Will Kimlicka, Canada liberal philosopher. You have to read him. Now, if you read Kimlicka, liberal philosophy, who's talking about minorities, of the minorities within the minorities, then you have to know about legal pluralism. Now, these are the theoretical framework that is there, but at the policy level, it is not there. The only thing, as you have very well found out, is it works only at the level of the village. Village Authority Act 1956, that is the only savior. Only there we can have a legislative power, executive power, and also judicial power in some sense. But in the state level, you cannot have legislative power and executive power. Now, the bureaucratic power that you are talking about, or those who are employed or in the higher, they have some influences, but the legislation is made by the legislative body. No? They are only the executive members. Therefore, we have no decision-making power at the legislative level. It's very complicated. So the only place where it works is our own villages. Our own villages. Anyway, I don't want to go to politics there. That is my input to your paper, and I congratulate you for such a good paper. I want you to do really good work, and I'll be there to help you. Kanain, a little bit of like here and there, and conceptually like contradiction. One concept that you have to think, I have not also written very well, is neutral. Neutrality concept he applied to Oyama. In short, there is nothing is neutral. Everything is positive. The fact that Koms are saying we are a tribe, Kom tribe, we are not Naga, we are not Kuki, doesn't mean that we are neutral. We are actually saying we are neutral to violence. We are neutral to killing. If you say Nagaing natin to Kuki na that I any Manipur politics too. Cooking natin to Naga na that kakan kasi gate, especially during the ethnic times. There is, we are neutral to violence and we are pro to coexistence. And secondly, Komrem, you are trying to work on the concept Komrem. A thought into my picture. And the first point, the idea of Komrem is a beautiful, emotionally, it is a socio-religious concept that began from 1950s. We all know this. And in Pu Sompa is one of the fundamental person who coined this word Komrem. Now, it's all stories there. It was a socio-religious. It is not a socio-political. It is a socio-religious. Now, secondly, this concept was very successful during the time of the Kuki-Naga conflict, ethnic conflict. It was, although, as I said, we are martyrs to a peaceful coexistence, it was to a certain extent, it was successful. But soon after that, slowly started breaking up. Now, at this point, yesterday also we are discussing, our leaders here, we were discussing, Tohon Kantari, and Atunin, Samlapa Kaya, he was Kaitari, he quote a Tomurodo, and Emma Agari Mansam, I mean, Danrigata Kari, I think Manjul Kakin, he Atunin, pro Komram Kam Kati, and Sung Hin. No? Kain Haiti and suggestion terming. It is a reality, it has to go, it has to come, it is going. Taka Kain, he was Chungina, question in Hitakadanum Kata. Any intellectual mean reflect across it. Pro Komram, I can question in Higatan Humkame. Haimagada Rain Katit question Gasu. Atuna Arlag kinder tribe in Kom dominate and the tone and the tea, answer and the process. That is my simple. I don't have answer. Answer I make. Kinder tribe in Kom and manipulate and Komi. Kom from Hiyama and the Tohi, Kongan answer and project number one. Number two, Kom from Nitin, so how will you handle the religious diversity? I are to fundamentally Komram is a socio-religious concept, and it is blessed by KRBCA, one religious organization. So you have land up into a organization level. Lalboy, I would like you to think, how will you answer the question of this kind? How will you, if you say Komrem, then how will you answer the question of religious diversity or denominational diversity? That's the fact of life. I more and money my own church coming question atuna counter any research intellectual me. I want to ask this question, all of you, especially if you are talking about Komrem. No, repeat lono insana. Kai kungahin ma kom in control atromanity he answer necrosis. Secondly, akana denominational diversity he Komrem nati sang chukuan ma nangin handle natrosik. Number one. Kana no in pro kom you can pro com research control you can. Here were two questions he kai dar hunju. Can you leave your ulana, your kindred, and go away? Ni ulana hai niti hai. Hina history kana kam kana foot hila like amat me. Chung ting katinga ayang push into trauma. Finally, we are in the from the very early onwards we have been together in one place. Can we leave them and go split one by one all together based on the constitutional category? That is my first question to them. Secondly, more important, Nipun leader in Angyam, I more in Agahayuanti, Kasi, Nipun leader I punche pulai patting it and money Nagapun in Jangya. How will you answer this? How will you answer this? This is a complicated reality. Answer naming. I just, as a scholar, as a thinker, I just throwing the question to you. Nani nega. And in Kiwahinitrit, I have a question now. We are like everybody is facing this problem. We have to challenge this problem. We have to face this. And my only suggestion for the with this last one, I will stop. Any intellectual suggestion the only place where we can trip as an intellectual group, we come here as to play our role. What is our role? And in dialogue, if one may re-establish the concept. Dialogue is the most important. Dialogue is the lifeline of our Kom people, our Komrem people, whatever, Ram people, whatever, is the oxygen, oxygen of life. Dialogue later di communication amaga ngang na dardi. Atun chen treat je magati and ang chukating kani chu hinting kaching ate. Kawa dialogue klak igati ka any intellectual hin dialogue establishing kono. Kanning chay ju dialogue hi am communication to lerdi. There will be understanding. Amaga ama amuk khang na rakani. Nang man rat ya jang din namalung usat ba maksudnya. Kawaka, this is the greatest role that we have as intellectual. Kawayara kan atuna hiwa ikina kimin kay medamen introduce atloa ram intellectual ati haisama kom ram nitimak. Haisama kom nitimak. Haisama rem niti. Question kada any Pu Bosco in Karam tribe kan adaringa oh Alex Professor Alex so mi haichu Naga scholar unta Naga ting say Kuki scholar and ting Kuki ting say and is haiti name of me Atikam Gatia Kawaka somewhere we are still there, the space is there. He was space araming the ton tarmak yeme tunin ram nita ayari a space because it is a history, it's a fact, it is an identity. You cannot ignore it. You cannot run away from this. The role of the intellectual from me. Lastly, let me say, Pu Alella, Pu Stony and Manini, Manin. And money energy sen yauna nacho and money interest katua lungsat any sikan mandanyar he was platform in tong sama. I would attribute this platform as the first platform for dialogue. He dialogue niti any indigenous study kan tu maika mayan may ma adaikara ไม่ปูนิวันดองมาตรงรีก็คือ dialogue นี่ที่นี่ dialogue นี่ที่จะตุนงานจะ academic is slightly powerful ไก่หินก็ทำยังไงแต่ญาณก็เป็นจุดว่าจะดิกตักมาแต่ dialogue นี่ที่ดองมาลุงใช่มาตรงที่ละอันนี้สัก dialogue เขาว่าเขา establish โลนึกก็ and manin he and platform ปรัชญากันเป็นนี้อันนี้he wah he ini pra corporate ni tosik hai la mai lim pro corporate ni tosik yar he wan the troi tang trun ka tratak kat ka ri hom ngan ti sina finally kai thesis example kai hiran kai thesis se kina Komrem identity and ethnicity in Manipur he defend kat lokar hen kai ni narrative hi hai ma kata discuss kai lo hin kan history hi Khurpui narrative he explain gato hin Khurpui is a historical event. The time it's not like somebody say that is you coming from mothers, but it's an event of the. It's actually it's an event of a history wherein you were under subjugation. You are able to come out. So historical event explain gato hin kana jo khabalha kan hong suk ek Khurpui ka kata kasak hin first line kai sak community ngai gate community ngai in lagi hi chu. No, academic, there are 3 professors who thesis depend katlo in emotionalization in jarachu. Kagiyang kina a researcher from within is very different. The research that I'm doing is part of my blood. It is part of my life. I cannot dissect it. I cannot kina keni in de atitaka kakayama. It is called a lived experience. Na kakan kachanga ngan thank you so much for this Com TV and Ram Intellectual collective. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
In PART-2 Professor Alex Nikara Dr. Kim Naile Professor Reimagining nanti hinom komo bongkat part
Naining, I read us.
Abana program sin nanti thang thai topic num.
Naining nang hay makat be to I read yo. O ko try o kai hay read rang. Hay te feedback ka to amak yo ta ka trap. O the pulal boy hay ka try yo from the theological perspective. For the first time coming on the table, he bagapo platform ano ni kenga kanju Kenya changinom kathata kanai toyo aini haimo aini ring thaina hai khanga ma conceptualize ong ko jang theoretical framework her kip ko kathapa tia kai sik chu ka thair yo kana and then kai how it appears to me is he was part atun nanin to 11 o'clock yo he so he was historic moment ke ini sih no and the topic is very tunawan ne chong pai ti sap kan very it matters any life anything ko emotional om hai ka chang po ting di tin tu khana lung set kam ta phat no kan chu lung set kam ta pung pham lung set kam ta kani kan chu meaning kam ta presentations from different angles which concerns our tribe which concerns our community no aram ni amnan hey aninum and this is pandemic time lung her kam lung set kam inland sa kam tiak kalo kay malung sunga tu khanga kan kasu aya tu aram dhalaba kam mehe tu na ni pharam nahi no o the pulal boy into the Puran for join ito keni ni imfalan put mo kamin not in hot anu may ko kasi ya mam in pag ay ran hang kay hay toro kay tikan mam phat ka ay jong tuningin pui ka tu kan o the pulal boy kon kanum o atia o the pia kan mam to thai ka ya kan hay to khanga hain big nga coordinate anan hi hin pura an matha tu kai man sayo ke ka machub le ya because I need the details keni nang khan mo tun na to khan mo professor hin chang assistant professor mo present na le to yo mo kana tu ho the pool al boy kam hey mo khana mo publish la in to kam ma public kam authenticity ka no research sa jang ya kan hey na keep ka every now and then WhatsApp at ang phone ang kangain to yung puyay katuke kan to Stony Allen manium hingahin tori kanga man ito sik hay kanga mo collaborate nito sik live man man sik hay kanga mo han to naining nga janginom kanga kantay to nitar na ni amna ma Jharkhand kakip yung Mumbai Manipur different parts of Manipur kanju ka hi Depura hay unayong kanju Shillong Delhi kakip so yung man kamera lungsat ka take ay nin successfully man jang impact ka her ni malunga ring track rasa kan karam so rasa impact ka do Kom TV director le producer hai
in pa kome line in khalim kai thin ham chu hiwaka po phat ko hoi pha ka tha rem intellectual forum nangnin nan tai man trua ni kara ni phung le jat kara le ka them nang ni hen program nan tai man tru ki aput na ka chang khana akina ni oja puna hi ka po khan aput na ke hi just one step ke 1000 step tung na si ka just one step begin with one step today kan aban bananum ka sesik manti ka taksan khana cái com TV producer pu kha internet kha ya loa internet kha ya ma par khan live kha lai omok yoning YouTube kha asang inom hiva session second session hichu jinga YouTube khan kan hayap sigyo dan khenga chunga awe no in pa kan in pa na kan he pong kana discussion na speaker hai ka changa khan ok chu paper present ka to hai dan khenga chunga pathenam ham tra abuk ti chang ra so ramang hoi
Ramang hui pakom en pakom
en kain khat le di rong akina kan liu ne an liu
nei ni rong ati
ri rasa
akia chu kai imo comment chu pek ma yoning ta kha tuning paper presenters say inni chunga kan pa nga khai phong khan khawa paper chunga khan kenum imo mande thena hingya kamu katinom khakan I learned there's so many things to learn and I've learned khakakatinoma khan olex chunga avea scientifically hay manjom sa kan pa na kai phunga ke kajara ha stonily alenum kom TV collaborate ni to na hin nang ni nam hoita respondent nei to kan tuninga hivena ini juma ka yaun changro so YouTube ka jaun changro so ini ni kinga hin kana hinya athana nimuti ken kai dia ke enum kan pa na kai phungi sengin changro so thengum ka thengyo
Alen
pa kom
station in kalim hay loro ito host wika
hai
screenshot in kalim hay loro